Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, Michael Cohen makes a confession under cross-examination in Donald Trump's so-called hush money trial. And one step closer to reopening one of the nation's largest ports. More from Baltimore as crews refloat the vessel that led to the collapse of the Key Bridge.
And more summer-like weather is on the way through Wednesday. Those details coming up as Mountain News at 5:30 starts right now.
Dedicated to Southern and Eastern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News at 5:30.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. Lawyers for Donald Trump wrapped up their cross-examination today of the prosecution's star witness in the New York criminal trial against the former president. Trump's one-time personal lawyer and fixer, Michael Cohen, testified about stealing from the Trump organization and shared that he may want to follow his former boss into politics. CBS's Jared Hill reports from New York.
Back on the witness stand, Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's former fixer, admitted to stealing $30,000 from the Trump organization. The confession came during the third day of cross-examination. Cohen testified that when he invoiced the Trump organization in 2017 for what he says was reimbursement for payments to Stormy Daniels, he also included funds meant for a tech firm, but he never paid the company. "So you stole from the Trump organization, right?" the former president's lawyer asked Cohen on the stand. "Yes, sir," Cohen admitted.
It felt like one of those moments on the stand where he raised his voice and felt like he'd really caught Cohen in yet another scheme in front of the jury.
Prosecutors later let Cohen explain that between paying Stormy Daniels and getting a smaller than expected bonus, Cohen felt like he wanted to charge Trump a little extra.
They have no case, they have no crime.
Trump's defense lawyers are trying to undermine Cohen's credibility. He's the only person who testified that Trump had personal knowledge of an illegal scheme to falsify business records related to Daniels' payment. The former president denies any wrongdoing.
You have a lawyer, you pay him a legal expense, and it's covered in the book as legal expense. I had nothing to do with it. A bookkeeper put it down as a legal expense.
Cohen is the prosecution's last witness, sending the case over to the defense. The judge says he expects closing arguments next week. Jared Hill, CBS News, New York.
Michael Cohen also testified that he is thinking about running for Congress, in part because of his name recognition. Also in New York, a search warrant was executed at the home of the accused Gilgo Beach killer Rex Heuermann. Heuermann has been charged with murder in the cold case deaths of 4 women found buried along a remote beach parkway. The Suffolk County District Attorney's Office declined to comment on what investigators were looking for. Heuermann's estranged wife and 2 children live in the house, but only his daughter was home at the time of the search. Pro-Palestinian protesters interrupted Jerry Seinfeld's comedy show in Virginia this past weekend. The protesters disrupted the set, yelling about children in Gaza. Video from the event shows at least 1 man was escorted out. In a statement, 7 venues said it was deeply disappointed about what happened and that it stands by its policy to remove hecklers. Earlier this month, protesters walked out of Seinfeld's commencement speech at Duke University.
We are toasty on this Monday. Most of us about 10 degrees above average for the late parts of May, up to 83 in Jackson, 87 this evening over in Clay County from Manchester. Also in Irvin, up to 86 over in Somerset at this hour. We should be in the middle 70s, so we are warm to kick off the work week. A live look from the London Corbin Airport, tracking some blue sky and some sunshine back in the distance, all thanks to high pressure. And up on the radar, a clean sweep, and that will continue through this evening. Also tonight, and more dry weather is on tap to go into tomorrow for most of us. A small chance of a passing shower, but for most, one more dry and warm day is on the way thanks to this area of high pressure. So be sure to enjoy that because we are tracking some changes as we go later on into this week. But in the short term, some more dry weather is on the way. Those temperatures this evening are mild in the upper 70s to lower 80s. Eventually, we fall into the upper 50s to lower 60s to wake up on Tuesday. And some more mainly dry weather on the way tomorrow. A small chance of a shower, but higher rain chances by Wednesday evening, pushing into Wednesday night. Also by Thursday, Friday, and this weekend. All those details coming up in just a little bit. Steve?
All right, Cameron, thank you. At least 8 people were killed by severe thunderstorms that rolled through Houston, Texas last Thursday. The latest death was related to carbon monoxide poisoning. That's been an issue as residents use generators after widespread power outages. The area's power utility, CenterPoint, has restored electricity to more than 630,000 residents, but as of early this afternoon, more than 215,000 customers still did not have power. The Dolly cargo ship that crashed into the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore in March, killing 6 people, is finally on the move. Crews successfully refloated the vessel Monday morning, marking a major milestone. CBS's Skylar Henry reports from Maryland.
The 984-foot Dolly cargo ship slowly inched away from the remnants of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore. Beginning at high tide, tugboats surrounded the damaged vessel, moving it back to port at about 1 mile per hour, with its 21-member crew on board.
We're excited to see us reach that milestone, but we understand that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
It's been nearly 2 months since the ship crashed into the Key Bridge, killing 6 construction workers.
The whole bridge just collapsed. The whole bridge just fell down.
On Sunday, crews went through an 18-hour checklist, which included releasing anchors used to stabilize the ship, pumping out water from it, and clearing the remaining roadway sitting on top.
With every layer that was lifted on whichever salver was working, they had to examine and then engineer the next cut, the next lift.
Officials say the refloat of the Dolly signals a major step forward. Crews will now work to remove the remnants of the bridge from the river with hopes of fully reopening the channel by the end of the month. Meanwhile, federal transportation officials have been trying to determine exactly what caused the collision.
Our investigators have been on scene consistently since this accident.
Last week, the NTSB released a preliminary report which found the ship had a pair of electrical failures just minutes before the crash and had experienced 2 blackouts while in port a day earlier, one of which was caused by a crew error. Skylar Henry, CBS News, Dundalk, Maryland.
It is still unclear when the crew on board the Dolly will be able to return home. Officials may question them as part of their ongoing investigation. The Supreme Court has refused to hear a case from parents who say their school district was hiding transgender support plans involving their children. 3 parents had sued the Montgomery County School District in Maryland about 2020 guidelines that allowed schools to develop support plans for transgender students, while also keeping certain information confidential at the students' request. The U.S. Supreme Court is letting Maryland's ban on assault weapons stand. Today, justices declined to hear a challenge to Maryland's law banning 45 specific firearms, including the AR-15 and copycat weapons. Some gun rights groups call the ban unconstitutional and political, but justices declined to hear the case ahead of an appeals court ruling. 6 appeals on the same issue are pending at the Supreme Court from the state of Illinois. The High Court in London has ruled that Julian Assange has the right to appeal to make a final challenge against his extradition to the United States. The WikiLeaks founder faces trial in this country after his company published highly classified material on its website between 2010 and 2011. He faces spending the rest of his life behind bars if convicted. The judge said Assange declined a chance to attend the hearing. The Senate will vote on a bipartisan border bill later this week. Majority Leader Chuck Schumer made the announcement in a Dear Colleague letter Sunday. He calls the legislation, quote, serious-minded. In February, the initial package, which included border provisions and aid to foreign allies, was stalled by the Senate. Former President Donald Trump and some top House Republicans all criticized the bill, and the Senate later approved a foreign aid package separately. You could start seeing fewer ads for sports gambling on television if a New York congressman gets his way. Representative Paul Taco says sports gambling has become the Wild West. He is pushing a series of changes in how companies can market to customers. Taco says the U.S. should treat gambling advertisements much like the regulation of the tobacco industry in the 1960s. Taco's Safe Bet Act would ban sportsbook advertising during live sporting events, among other things.
We know that there are addictive qualities that can happen, and what our effort here is to make certain that this known addictive product is a safer product.
Taco says 7 million Americans have a gambling problem or addiction. The American Gaming Association says U.S. sportsbook revenue reached a record $10.9 billion in profits last year. A new study shows more than 1/3 of Americans have more credit card debt than they do emergency savings. Advice about how to pay off that debt while building an emergency fund.
Plus, the forecast looks a little bit more soggy by this holiday weekend. Your first alert forecast coming up.